for the past 7 years now, I've been filming a documentary that just keeps on growing and growing and growing. Together with a Canadian partner, Mark, who's not here, our cameraman. When we started, the project was originally about drugs, about entheogens in particular, and we thought that we wanted to visit different places and film different rituals. And the first place we went to was Mexico, a place called Huautla de Jimenez. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Huautla de Jimenez was the village where Maria Sabina was from. Maria Sabina was a Mazatec shaman woman who was found by this guy called Wasson. You might be familiar with this story. Wasson developed the theory in the 50s. He was a banker that at some point in human history, there was a mushroom cult where a mushroom was adored. And then he found out that in Mexico, they were taking these psychedelic mushrooms, and he went and he found Maria Sabina, and with this he rediscovered psychedelic mushrooms for the world at large. He wrote an article that was published in Life magazine, and which was called The Magic Mushroom. In this article, he told the story of Maria Sabina, the shaman. He told the story of the mushrooms. And he basically changed the name of the place, he changed the name of the area, and he changed Maria Sabina's name in order to protect her. But pretty soon people found out anyway, and they started arriving in large numbers to this village to find this woman and these mushrooms. Also, it was also through this article in Life magazine that Timothy Leary got interested in, and then in 1962 he took mushrooms in Cuernavaca. That was Timothy Leary. Then came the 60s, LSD. I mean, you could really trace a whole series of things that happened in the 60s and in general with drugs and entheogens directly from that article that Wasson wrote. When we arrived in Huautla de Jimenez, it was almost, I think it was the year 2000, so it was more than 40 years after Wasson's visit. And we went there, we were looking for Salvia Divinorum, and we were basically following Wasson's footsteps. So the first place we went to was Huautla de Jimenez. What we found was really, really, really depressing. Really depressing. Huautla was one giant mushroom supermarket. You were being offered mushrooms as soon as you got off the bus. Everybody was a tourist guide. Everybody had an aunt who was a shamana. And I mean, the taxi stop was called Maria Sabina. The mushroom postcards were sold in every store in the village. And you know, but what was really bad wasn't this. I mean, what was really bad was like the air in the village. I mean, the ambient, the place was so bad. I mean, it was a place full of not very happy people, and it wasn't very good. It wasn't very good. We also visited Maria Sabina's family, you know, her daughters, and some other people from the village. We spent some time there, and we got to hear a lot of stories, and we got to learn a lot of things. And what slowly became clear is to which degree, like this influx of visitors, you know, had completely destabilized, you know, which was basically a very small, very conservative, very far away village that had never really been visited by. This is the reason why the mushroom cult was surviving there, because it was truly so far from the world. You know, it took, when Wasson went there, it took 1 week riding donkeys to get there. So all these people started to arrive, and by the early 60s, first is mostly Americans, and then by the early 70s, it starts to be also Mexican hippies. And then at this point, the place gets packed. There's a big scandal because the son of some Mexican minister is in there, and then they send the army, and the army kicks all the foreigners out, and they set up this post in the foot of the mountain before you get to the village, and it's still there. It's still there. So that was my first experience in the documentary. That was the first thing. We went basically very far away from Huautla, several valleys, to another place, and over there we found a very wonderful man, a very old guy, Don Eligio, who gave us ololuiki seeds. And I had an absolutely terrible night. And it came up, there was a point in the night where I found myself twisted like a pretzel, coming out, just horrible, while this guy, the old man, and his son squeezed me all over, pushed in different places, and sang and pressed, and there was a point really where I just gave up. I said, like, okay, they obviously know what they're doing. I don't know what is happening, and I'm just gonna put myself in their hands. And at this point, I felt deeply, deeply, deeply white, and deeply, deeply, deeply stupid. Really stupid. I felt really stupid about the questions that I've been making, about my stupid documentary, about the stupid fucking ideas that I had in my head when I arrived there, about everything. It was so ridiculous. I mean, I was such an idiot, you know, to which degree I didn't understand what this was, and to which degree my head had been actually full of, like, ridiculous notions, you know. 7 years later, I think these two experiences basically have marked themselves to the point where they have repeated again and again in one form or another. I felt stupid many times. And I've had to consider once, again and again and again, the way that we as a culture, I mean, I'm going to say gringos because gringos are all the foreigners. I'm from Spain, but I mean, I'm really, I would be a gringo. Gringo are everybody that is not from that place. The way that certain well-meaning but ignorant forms of interest can actually turn tremendously destructive. So that, I mean, you can say, after seeing Huautla, I began to get worried that if I ever finish this documentary, and in the unlikely case that this documentary was very successful, the worst thing that could happen was that the places that I talked about actually got ruined, like Huautla, where by the loads of arriving people who were interested, who genuinely wanted to try that, but this genuine interest can actually be very destructive of certain places. Why? Because there's an equilibrium, because they're basically faraway places, and because they're much poorer than we are. So that even the arrival of money, beyond the good that comes from the arrival of money, which of course is good that everybody makes money and has more money, it destabilizes the place, and it creates frictions, it creates envies, it creates an inequality that wasn't there before. And this inequality at the end is pretty bad for the place. This is what had happened, for example, with Maria Sabina's family. It had gotten, it imploded, it exploded in inner warfare about who was getting what from all the money that, the gringos we were innocently bringing in trying to experience this. I mean, in trying to find this in perfectly legitimate searches. I couldn't. This is the part where it was really ironic. That it was good intentions all around. It was good intentions all around. I couldn't point any fingers and say these are the bad guys. There were no bad guys, but yet this mixture together created. So this is since there's been already a lot of talk about, like, the chemistry of ayahuasca and about the history of ayahuasca and all these things. I think I would like to talk a little bit about this. I'd like to talk a little bit about us instead of about them, because in all these years of filming, I've been forced to look at myself again and again and again. And again and again and again, I felt like a fucking idiot. I mean, there's no other way to describe, this is the learning process has been one of constantly realizing to which degree, I had tunnel vision. I was only looking at what I was interested in. You know, I'd been traveling all over the world, and it was like the only part of the world that interested me were certain substances and the people who gave them. And the rest of the environment, the rest of the country, the rest of the trip, the rest of their neighbors, the rest of their history, the rest of their culture, the rest of their economy, the rest of their knowledge, all of this I was leaving out because, you know, my tunnel vision, it was like, just only when they talk about plants did my ear perk up, you know. But fortunately, you know, if you spend enough time in these places, then you'll be forced to learn the rest. The other thing that happened to me was that I was filming, I was working, and then I was saving some money, and I would continue filming. And while I was working, I would read because I couldn't film, and I read a lot. And you know, after I finished with the usual books, that is, books that are written for people who are only interested in entheogens, that only deal with this, you know, tunnel vision books. Then there's other books. There's the books from anthropologists, the books of historians, the books of economists, the books of psychologists. And these people are, okay, they mention entheogens, but, you know, they bring the whole wide concept of it, you know. And then you start to have to deal with, you know, because mostly entheogens come from America. You know, in this case, I was dealing strictly with, you know, South American. You have to deal with this thing that they call colonialism. Colonialism is the story of how the gringos came to this continent, and then they started to take everything. They started to take everything, sometimes by, you know, military conquest. And sometimes it wasn't so simple because, you know, for example, in Mexico, you know, Mexico City was the biggest city in the world when the Spanish arrived, Tenochtilan. And it was conquered by 200 Spaniards. Of course, 200 Spaniards couldn't conquer the biggest city in the world. It was conquered by 200 Spaniards and 50,000 locals from other nations who hated the Aztecs, because the Aztecs were, you know, an empire like most empires, who tend to like abuse their neighbors and take the money for themselves, and well, you know what empires do. And this happened a lot. The Spaniards played off the local rivalries, and this is a lot of what happened in the Amazon as well. You had, I mean, when they arrived to the Amazon, what they found that there was a lot of families, a lot of ethnic groups, a lot of tribes, and these tribes were basically in constant warfare with each other, and they had been since forever. And some of them were in more or less good terms, and some of them were deadly enemies from these neighbors, and they've been neighbors forever, and they've been deadly enemies since forever. So it was very easy for the Spaniards to join one or the other against the enemies and get help. And indeed, very often they used some Indian tribes to enslave other Indian tribes. So if you think about it, you know, the process is a little bit, if you imagine if aliens landed in the earth today, you know, and aliens were really interested, at first just a few, not very many, and they were interested in something that is relatively common, but, you know, not so important, like, I don't know, beach sand. And there comes these aliens, and they like the beach sand, which for us is not that big of a deal. And they have amazing tools, you know, anti-gravity devices, crazy technologies that look so appealing, you know. Well, naturally, you're very drawn towards these extraterrestrials, and you want to know more, you know. And sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're a little bit bastardly, but sometimes they give you some of these tools. So you take these. This is how this process took place. I mean, it wasn't like a big military conquest. It's a very insidious process. And sometimes it's done in good terms through commerce and friendship. Sometimes it's done in bad terms through warfare. But the overall effect is always the same. It's a slow eroding, you know. We take more and more and more and more. You know, first it was the natural resources, you know, the land, you know, the gold, the wood, you name it, you know. Then it was like their souls that they wanted, and there was like, you know, missionaries coming and trying to get their, you know, get inside their heads and teach this like other God, you know. And I think the error is that we think that this colonialism has somehow ended. It's over, and it's no longer happening, you know, because this already took place and they're now independent nations. But it isn't. It continues, and the latest version of it, it's a cultural colonialism. That means that the gringos are moving inside their culture like they moved inside their land, you know. And this is not, I'm trying to analyze, it's not a matter of like evil gringos, you know. It really isn't. It's not a matter of like evil people and innocent. It's just a process that continues, and it continues regardless of the fact that, we like to think of ourselves, and we think of ourselves as pretty honest, good people who don't rob, who don't steal, who don't take from others, you know. And in many cases, our very presence, you know, it's already a powerful imposition. I mean, what you know, this vacation on Gringo with this super powerful currency, you know, that can arrive and everything seems cheap, you know. He's throwing money away, and he's a nice guy, you know. And this I want to make clear. This was me, you know. This was me. So I want to talk a little bit about this, about this process, because I think there's a certain idea that it lives inside our culture. You know, I call Western culture, which derives from, you know, Greek, Judeo-Christian, and it's basically the idea that somewhere else, it's called the pastoral idea. It's the idea that somewhere else people live in a state of pure harmony with nature. This idea was actually manifested already in what was called pastoral poetry. Pastoral poetry was Greek poetry from 2,500 years ago. So 2,500 years ago, the Greeks believed, they were already so urban, that they believed that in the mountains of Greece, there were these shepherds, and these shepherds lived a pure life in harmony with nature that was beautiful and pure and simple. This idea is that old. 3,000 years ago, people already believed this, you know, that somehow we've lost contact with nature, that somehow this contact of nature, it's more authentic and better and more real. Now, this idea, this pastoral idea, has shifted and moved and became part of like Western mindset since. It revived, you know, during the Romantic period. And then it finally manifested in Rousseau's idea of the noble savage. Rousseau was this guy who had never met any real Indians, but he imagined that these people that were living closer to nature and like in harmony with it somehow were these noble savages, were actually creatures that were like noble and in perfect harmony with nature. This idea still lives in our heads. This idea that still somehow, this idealized native peoples, you know. This idea is not true. I mean, it's not that it's not true. It is true in a sense, but it's not true because it denies them of the most basic thing, which is their being human beings. It makes us believe that somewhere there are other people that are not like us. Somehow. Which, of course, they aren't. They are purely human beings, and I think if any of you spend any amount of time searching for this and meeting real curanderos and spending some time with them, sometimes a long time with them, sooner or later you're gonna realize that really, you know, shaman or not shaman, this is really a person. You know, a person that has sometimes problems with his wife, a person that maybe likes to drink so much, a person that knows some things and doesn't know other things. It's certainly not like a, you know, it's no Buddha, it's no Yoda. It's no Yoda. But this idea is very powerful. This idea, I mean, it's taken me years to get rid of this idea. Years of constant exposure, you know, to slowly drop the tunnel vision, drop everything, and finally started seeing people in front of me, more people. As a matter of fact, people living in a particularly fucked up situation, you know, of the world. And this reflects in everything. This reflects in their medicine, this reflects in their culture, this reflects in their day-to-day relationships, you know. So, on my travels, I met a number of other seekers, and some of them had been much more brave than I had been, and some of them had really gone quite deep into some indigenous communities and had spent some time there. The general the general story that I heard from these people, you know, was always one form or another of deep disappointment. These people felt that they had been treated really bad. They had gotten ripped off. Some of them had nearly gotten killed. You know, they were very disappointed. And what's more, they actually believed that what they believed was that if they went deep enough, they would be able to find this very old, very wise man, you know, that would teach them. They now believe that that wasn't true, that they had been wrong. And they were actually quite angry at these communities and about the way they had been treated, because they arrived there with all the good desire, you know, with all the good intentions and with all the good everything to learn, and instead they just got like ripped off and fucked over and laughed at and all of these things, you know. So again, you know, what is at play is like a lack of a basic ability to see people as people, you know. If you just take that same story and you put it somewhere else, all of a sudden it starts to make perfect sense, you know. For example, imagine that, I don't know, that your father is somewhere in Texas, they're making this up, a cowboy. A cowboy, old-style cowboy, that means he runs with cows, you know, and he has some horses and he takes them up and down and all of this. And, you know, and he's got some kids, and they're, you know, that's a cowboy, but, you know, they got like radio and TV, and they like hip hop, and they got like hats on backwards and stuff, and yeah, cowboy's okay, but, you know, okay. And sometimes the guy is a little bit of a pain in the ass when he starts talking again about the horses and all of this, you know. And then one day in your doorstep shows up a millionaire German. Young guy, speaks the language a little bit badly. You know, he has a lot of money, seems to have a lot of time, and he's fascinated with cowboys, and he wants to learn, he wants to be a cowboy. He wants to be a cowboy, he wants to be a cowboy, and he's looking at the father like a real cowboy, like wow, and everything that the father does is like fucking wow, because wow, double wow, and you know. So I mean, at some point or another, you know, the father is gonna get like, well, let me tell you a thing or two about cowboys. No? Because it's normal. I mean, you just created an audience. You just have an audience, you know. And so this guy starts to stay, starts to hang around. And okay, you know, he's nice and he's got money, but then at the same time, he's a little bit weird, you know. He's a little bit weird about his food. He's a little bit weird about the way he speaks. He doesn't really understand everything, you know. And he has this like, and sometimes you even see him like, he's giving a little bit of this disapproving look, like he doesn't really approve of like certain things you do and the way you quite get drunk and the way you go about these things and the way you go about these other things. So I mean, this relationship builds up, or like, okay, the German is here, but okay, it's been like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and you know what, maybe you start getting a little bit sick of a German. Maybe you start, you know, I mean, I don't have to continue the story. You see how it develops. It's completely normal. It's completely normal. It's difficult, but just imagine that like more Germans arrive, and more Germans arrive, and more Germans arrive, and it comes to the point where like, you know, and on the other hand, this really cowboy lifestyle was dying off, you know, and there are more Germans coming and more Germans coming, and they now learn to play the ukulele, and they can sing this like ukulele music, a little bit with German accent, you know, sounds a little bit strange, you know, hillbilly with a German accent, but okay. And there more and more and more arrive, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, one of these guys, or maybe even one of the Germans with many years, has a brilliant idea, because these guys are running around and many of them are having hard time finding real cowboys, and he just like gets the idea, you know. Cowboy school, German spoken, Euros accepted, you know, and there you have it. And I'm not trying to be, you know, if you take, for example, mariachi music is considered the most typical expression of Mexican that there is. This is like the big guys with the big sombreros, big guitars, big mustache. I mean, there's nothing more Mexican than mariachi music. But mariachi music isn't Mexican. I mean, it was German polka music that arrived in Mexico, you know, and then it picked this like Mexican, and now it's turned, and this is how cultures get made. I mean, I don't have an issue with this. This is how it happens, you know. I don't have an issue with this, you know, with these German cowboys of the future, you know, and they might very well be the ones who actually saved this cowboy lifestyle, just like it was some like white dorky guys that saved the blues. You know, it wasn't black people that like made the blues. It was a bunch of like dorky guys that lived in the cities that became obsessed with this type of music, and thanks to that, this music survives. You know, but what I am worried about, can you change? I want to talk about this guy. This guy, his name was Grey Owl. His name was Grey Owl, and he was one of the first. He was one of the first environmentalists. He was a writer. He wrote many books about the environment. He lived as a trapper, about trappers, about the Indians, and all of these relationships. And he became very popular. He even gave a tour. This was in the 1930s of England, giving talks about, like, you know, protecting the environment. And he even met the Queen of England. Can you pass to the next? This is him, and this was his wife. The only thing with Grey Owl is that when he died, it was discovered that his real name was Archibald Stansfeld Bellamy, and he had been born in England, and he was just an English guy who really wanted to be an Indian, and then he moved to Canada, and then he made up a fake story about himself to the degree where he actually married a real Indian woman. And he became super famous playing this image of the Indian that was the image of the Indian that everybody had in their heads. And he knew very well because he was a gringo. So he knew what the gringos wanted the Indians to be like, and that's the role that he played with great success. The next one? This is a recent case. This guy is called Terry Tafoya, is his name. He was a storyteller. He was a psychiatrist, a therapist. He was a very famous lecturer. He lectured more than 100 days a year. He lectured in Harvard University. Except that it just got recently discovered that, well, his real name is slightly different, and he's not at all Native American. He made it all up. He made it all up. Again, it's the same story. He was a brilliant storyteller, and he took the thing, and he had really made a most beautiful, I mean, his writings are actually very interesting. He had taken from many different parts of the culture, and he had created something that was very appealing. It's just that it wasn't true. It wasn't true. The next one. These are just the last three examples. This guy is called Ward Churchill. He's a great critic of, in general, the capitalist system, a great defender of, like, indigenous rights. He's written many books about many things, and it just got discovered that he also lied about his background. He's not at all a Native American. That was Long Lance Buffalo Child, same story. And this is a book that I actually read when I arrived in the United States, The Education of Little Tree, which is supposed to be an autobiographical book of a young boy with his grandfather, the Indian, that is also completely made up. Now, the question is, like, why do these people feel the need to, next one, to do this? You know, this phenomenon of Native American spirituality, culture, elements, rituals, you know, without any Native Americans. What's going on here, it's a continuation of the process, of the pastoral process, of the romanticization. The romanticization, again, this idea is so strong in our heads. That these people were, like, you know, true ecologists and in contact with nature and having these powers, having this very thing that we have lost in our society, in our culture, this thing that we yearn for, that we go and we look for it, you know, and if we can, because this is our nature, we take it. This is what we do. We take what we want. We take this is what we're all, as Westerners, this is what we're brought up to do, as gringos. Whatever you want, you go for it. You go for it. And this shows in all sorts of like embarrassing levels, you know? And this is like, as I was filming this documentary, I had to face myself about this again and again and again. I had to realize to which degree I'd been a fucking idiot. I mean, this is the word that I'm going to say again and again because it's true, you know? I'd been a fucking idiot with a head full of bullshit ideas that were not true. That were not true. And the worst part of it is that in the process, you're being very innocently very disrespectful. Very disrespectful. Go back to the previous one. This in the United States, this has gotten so bad with certain like New Age movements that basically there's already a whole bodies of, you know, native defense. This is like American Indians against New Age spiritual misappropriation. There are already organizations. There's actually web pages where you can find hundreds of these people denounced, people who claim to have like Indian powers, Indian rituals, Indian whatever, and you have like the actual nations, the Lakota, the Sioux, saying, this guy is not with us, we don't know him, we disapprove. The problem with it basically is like Native American rituals were not, they were not a religion like Christianity. It was something for them. They didn't try to convert other tribes to the religion. It wasn't a universal thing. It was a manifestation of a cultural unit, of a cultural identity. And this does not travel very well. So, I mean, when you find people who are trying to convince you to buy into some Native American ideas, they're being Western about Native ideas, because Native ideas are never, that's not the religion. The religion is not about convincing other people. The religion is for them. It's their religion, which expresses, you know, the people that they are. The problem is that we feel empty, you know, and we want to take what we feel we lack. And we imagine what we feel we lack, and we imagine that somewhere else it's not that way. And when we get somewhere else and we find out that it's still there is actually not, also again, it's just people, then somebody sooner or later does like these guys and says, well, I will play the Indian that I would like the Indians to be, you know? And then, of course, as soon as that guy is doing that, all the other ones that wanted exactly that type of Indian, buy it. Buy it. And it's, let's see how I go about it. I mean, I am very, you know, when I think about the future, you know, for example, I think about ayahuasca, and I think what can happen, or how is it gonna develop, or what you know, what really worries me is that even in the case of people who are genuinely interested, you know, and have all the goodwill, there is such great danger for like trouble, because the way we are, we just tend to take what we want, and if not, you know, we try to buy it, we try to have it, or we'll take a picture, and we're trying to grab things that cannot be grabbed. So we end up with simulacrums, you know, with fake, with empty forms. For example, a curandero, you know, has Icaros, and it has a Shacapa, and it has Agua Florida, it has all sorts of things that he uses. These things that he uses are just literally vehicles for his own power that he has. But the thing is, like, he's not very aware of this. So for example, if you went to talk to, I don't know, a javelin thrower about his javelin throwing, he would probably talk to you about his javelin. And he wouldn't think about his arm, because he takes his arm for granted, you know? You don't, but that's really what throws the javelin, and that's what he has. He has his arm. He has the fact that he has been throwing the javelin for 15 years every day, so he has a fucking mighty arm to throw javelins. The javelin itself is just, okay, well, there's better javelins than others, obviously, but I mean, it's just the tool. It's just the tool. But we always tend to think that we can have that. So for example, we think that if we buy the best skis, we'll be better skiers, which is not true. And we think that if we get the best sneakers, you know, we'll be the best basketball players, which is not true, because being a basketball player is not in your sneakers. Now, I see, you know, around, you know, this like, and again, you know, this gringo, there's an obsession with like, for example, Icaros or these things. And these things are not, you know, the training to be a curandero is not a training to learn Icaros. It's a training to be the kind of person that can put up with sick people day in and day out. And you need a training for that, because you're going to have to cure people that you don't like. You're going to have to cure people that are really sick. And you're going to have to deal with people that you really want to send home. You know, they will happen. People will come to you saying like, and they will come with like nasty shit, really nasty shit that they made to themselves or that other people did to them, you know, and you don't want to treat these people, but you have to. And this is the training. The training for the curandero is how to be strong enough to actually do this. Now, when you're strong enough to do this, when you have this built up, then the songs, the tricks, the effects, these all come by themselves, because they're just outside manifestations of something that is already inside. But because we think we can grab things, you know, we go and we try to like learn the Icaros, as if we're grabbing, and all we're grabbing are empty forms. All we're grabbing are empty forms. You know, I had like, some nights ago, I had this vision of this car, you know, and somebody had taken the body of the car, and the wheels, and the chairs, and everything except the engine. And they were sitting inside this car, you know, and they were going, and the car wasn't moving because it had no engine. But they had drunk ayahuasca, and they thought that the car was moving, you know. And this is the danger, that if you take the empty shape and you drink ayahuasca, you will think that the car is moving. You will think that something is happening. You will think that you have it. And what you have is an empty form, and you have no engine. And you have no engine. I mean, if you can't be a nurse, if you can't be a social worker, you can't be a curandero, you know. But we think, you know, and I'm guilty of this. I mean, I was there myself. I had all sorts of ideas and thought instincts and inspirations that it was coming and arriving to me, you know. We think, you know, because at least in my case, I came from taking drugs, that this was going to be like even better. It's going to be like the cool guy that has all the drugs and invites everybody, but even cooler, because it's like, well, it's got some like, you know, indigenous shine over it, you know. And this is very destructive, because curanderos, they almost never were basically just curanderos. They always had a job. They had a chakra. They grew their own food. I mean, they had something to do. You couldn't. It was hard in small villages to make a living being a curandero. It was just something else that they did. You know, people came for them to get cured. They did what they could, and if it worked, it worked, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. That's what it was. And it's not. This is not shamanism. This is traditional medicine, and this is not something strange or small or exotic. It's the medicine of the world. 2/3 of the world get treated by traditional doctors. The great majority of the world goes to traditional doctors just like that. We think it's exotic. What is exotic is guys in white coats, you know, magnetic resonance, you know, and nuclear medicine. That's fucking exotic. That's a rarity. I mean, that's real magic in this world, you know. Traditional medicine, you can find it in every last village of every corner of the world. And 500 years ago, that's all there was. There was no white coat guys. It was all traditional medicine, you know. So we think we're discovering something, you know, and the only thing we're discovering, once like the tunnel bishop drops, is how the rest of the world lives and goes to the doctor. Really. So I lost the had a good one there. Traditional medicine. The problem is that these guys, so This is the way it was. You went to the doctor, you know, if he could cure you, okay, he had another job. Now, when we, the gringos, start to arrive, a new type of situation arises where basically some people can afford to be nothing but curanderos because we pay so well. The problem is that when you're nothing but a curandero and you're living off the money of the gringos, then a commerce relationship had been established and they are clients, they're customers. And the customer is always right. And the customer gets what he wants because the customer is paying. So all of a sudden you're in a situation where certain things that wouldn't normally fly have to fly because this guy is going to give you, for one evening, 5 times the amount of money that you would make working in a week, maybe. You know, that's how it goes. So then, this very thing that fascinates us, and this very thing that we want to protect, and this very thing that we want to like maintain alive, and that seems to be in danger, we are actually, by our interest and by our influx of money, we're slowly eroding. Eroding towards, I mean, I don't know what, it will be the mariachis of the future. It will take another shape, but for sure it's not the shape that it had. It's not the shape that it had. This is the part, you know, making the documentary that was driving me crazy, that by looking at these things, you destroy them, you know? You destroy them. So then it's like, what do you do? You know, what do you do? What do you do if at the same point, if on one side this has helped you and this helped me so much in your life, this has been so special and you appreciate the work they do and you appreciate what these people are and you want to protect it and you want to help them, and at the same time, by doing all of these things, you're like, what do you do? So what I think I would say, you know, and with this I'm going to close, and it's the only solution that I have found, and I don't think there's a solution, you know, but I would like to ask it here, you know, publicly, is that please, please, please be very careful. See, if you're gonna enter other people's culture, you know, try to walk on your tiptoes. Try to be a fly on the wall, you know. Try to shut your mouth and open your eyes. And try to be careful. Because you cannot walk, you know, because we are German cowboys. We can be spotted 500 meters away. We stand out like a sore thumb. You know, with the fucking ridiculous sneakers, the shorts, you know, the hair like this, the big bills. You know, we're standing in the middle of the rituals and we are like so different, you know. And out of ignorance, we are likely to do all sorts of stupid shit that we shouldn't do and all sorts of very disrespectful things, you know. And it's out of ignorance, you know. But this is, I think it can be solved if you just apply some like common sense, you know. For example, everybody knows that when you go to the movies, you shouldn't talk to the person next to you even though you want to talk because there's other people watching a movie, you know. You might want to talk to the person, but you know, you usually leave that for later because then during the movies, everybody's quiet and watches the movie. You know, it's very simple. It's a very simple rule. Why? Because if you talk, you will distract other people who want to watch the movie. It's not a matter of like restricting, of censorship. It's not a matter of lack of freedom. I mean, it's just a matter of like collectively having some respect for everybody's movie watching. You know, this applies to all your ayahuasca experiences. You know, if you can just realize that anything that you do during the ayahuasca experience will be heard by everybody in the room, you know, and maybe they want to watch their own movie and not be bothered by anything that you might say, then probably that's enough for you to, you know, try to be quiet and try not to, even though you would like to like sing or yell or tap your foot or say, yeah, hey, go maestro, you know. It's just common sense, you know. It's just common sense, and that's all I would like to ask for. And now I'm just gonna run. Can you go back a little bit, just for? Oh God. This is actually the project. It started with American syncretic religions, then it went to traditional Amazonian medicine. 5 years later, I have 200 hours of footage, more than I can deal with, and very delicate material. Very delicate material because they're very personal processes of many people. What I would like to say, if you can go to the last one, is that basically I've been considering some sort of collective. I need help with this. I have very many interviews who are very interesting by very famous people. Jonathan Ott, Benny Shannon. I mean, if you're interested in this world, you'll be interested. And they have to be transcribed, you know, and they have to be indexed. And this is more hours than I have time for. So if you would be interested in some of this material, you know, my idea is basically to post the audio in the internet, and people maybe can help me you know, if one person wants transcription, it's not that much work. The interviews are well worth it, they're very interesting, you know. And then collectively, I can try to build this giant ayahuasca audiovisual archive that I've been working now for 7 years. That was it, thank you very much.